Everybody, welcome back to Texas A&M Aggies Live, home part of the Voice of College Football Network. My name is Cameron Honesty, obviously your host today. I am joined by, is it Cannon?
Cannon works just fine.
Cannon's perfect. Okay, because again, my last name is Honesty, so people screw that up a lot. Cannon Torres, who's become one of the better recruiting analysts, one of the guys who's on top of everything in terms of Texas A&M basketball, which has been a big part of A&M's kind of national view right now after the hiring of new head coach Bucky McMillan. Obviously, we all know that Buzz Williams departed for Maryland, I believe it's now 2 to 3 weeks ago. The coaching search did not take long for AD Trev Alberts, who went out, got his guy, 41-year-old Bucky McMillan, who led Samford to about 99 wins during his career there. Took the Bulldogs to the NCAA tournament during the 24 season. That was the first time in, I think, 24 years that he did that. Very, very impressive coach, going back to his high school days where I believe he won about 5 national championships. And especially, we always look at the age at 41, which is very big to me, especially as someone who has been covering recruiting and the ever-changing landscape with coaches. And really, these guys, if they're young and understand NIL, they understand how to recruit guys, how to utilize the transfer portal, especially knowing that every top school is going to go after top recruits and top transfer portal guys. It's imminent for McMillan, who is coming into the SEC, obviously biggest job he's ever had and may ever have, knowing that I can utilize what this program offers from a money standpoint, from a fan dedication standpoint, all those things. And this led to landing 3, I believe. Yeah, I'm trying to think now. Jakari Lane was the first, followed by who from North Alabama, followed by Zach Clements, who is a San Antonio native, and he played at Kansas for his last 3 years. Came off the bench. Those were the first 2 commits they had from the portal. That was followed by Mackenzie Macomb. I always screw that name up. It's Mackenzie Macomb.
I believe it's pronounced Mbako.
Mbako, yes. Thank you. Thank you for the save there, man. But that was the number 2 ranked player in the 23 class, according to ESPN. Extremely talented. Spent his last 2 years at Indiana, averaging 12.2 points per game, shot above 40% for the field, and is going to be an immediate starter for the Aggies next season. And after about, I think a couple hours after that, Josh Holloway, who played for McMillan at Samford, he was 6th man of the year in the SoCon. Efficient scorer, averaged nearly 8 points a game, a guy that can come off the bench and give you some great plus minutes. That was another big get for him. He's starting to fill out this roster. But today, I think some of the biggest news outside of obviously last Thursday's news was the landing of former Oklahoma guard Duke Miles, who you were on it immediately. You did a fantastic job kind of giving us a pathway of his visitation, how it was going, and leading to Tuesday's news that he's headed to College Station next season.
Yeah, it just is massive news coming out of the morning. I mean, we all saw this past week he had originally scheduled visits for the 4 that we saw in Texas A&M, Tennessee, Baylor, and USC, and it just kind of didn't go his way. The first week he had some stuff come up, but we quickly saw all of the schools reschedule it after he was able to. And what I thought was clear from the get-go is that A&M got 2 days with him to start off. I think that was intentionally planned because you want to have these experienced guards come in and produce immediately, even in this so-called hard SEC now that we have to keep up with.
Yeah, I agree. It's the thing is, and we had discussed, me and my co-host Will Stone had discussed, for the last one after he got hired, that the biggest hurdle he's going to have is building his first team because of the finishes by teams like Florida, Auburn. Kentucky's always going to be a huge contender with the transfer portal. It's just the allure of the program as a blue blood, but especially Florida, because winning the national championship the way they did with a bunch of kind of no-name players who came from the portal years ago from smaller schools that ended up becoming stars, that's going to lure away similar guys, and including guys from Sanford. We saw Sanford's top scorer, I think his second top scorer for the Bulldogs last season, transferred to USC, which again, that had to probably do with either NIL or the fact that USC was in kind of A&M shoes, rebuilding a roster, trying to get immediate starters, and getting to go play in California is obviously a plus for some of these guys. But we just knew that McMillan was going to have to prove his recruiting chops. He was going to have to prove that he can develop relationships, that he can, and especially with Miles, get these guys on campus and keep them there. I mean, that's the biggest thing, because as you just mentioned, Tennessee was up next. I mean, you've got programs who have already lured top talent away and have been more successful than A&M in the NCAA tournament, because we have to remember A&M has not made an Elite Eight ever in history. They've only made it to the second round, and even though Buzz Williams led them to 3 consecutive tournament appearances, it's one of those things where it's like you got to get past that. You got to show that you can have more success over a tenure, and he just never really showed that. But McMillan already, and the biggest excitement with him is the way that he coaches, the type of offense he's going to bring, which is very fast-paced. It's a very high-scoring offense. He wants players who shoot at a high rate above 40%. Buzz Williams, during his tenure, never really had that outside of guys like Wade Taylor, who, was kind of hot and cold sometimes, and they were predicated on rebounding and defense and buzz balls. They all knew it. And this is completely different, and it's going to lure in, I'm not going to say better players, but I'm going to say players who can immediately contribute at a high level. And Duke Miles is one of those guys. You look at his time at Oklahoma, it's pretty impressive. I mean, his scoring went down this season, and that had to do with a lot of things. He averaged about 9.1, and I think he was still shooting about 43% from the field and above 35% from three. But during the 23 season, he was averaging 17.5 points, and he was shooting 50% from the field, I believe, and above 40% from three. So he's been around, right? I think he was at High Point during his first stop. He's been around the bend. This is a very experienced player who I believe McMillan is very comfortable with coaching, because at his time during his tenure at Stanford, he was getting guys like that, guys who had been at multiple stops, who just wanted to play and have more play time. Maybe they weren't getting it there. But this is just a big deal, and this is a big move. And I do think it's going to lead to more. You might have even more information than I do on this subject, to be honest, being that, I'm also dealing with, football recruiting on a daily basis and stuff like that. And credit to McMillan. He's kept it pretty shut in terms of what to know. And I think this is one of those things where, because Miles had other visits with teams that were doing very well in the portal lined up, we just didn't know, right? It's kind of like, have a good visit, and then if you win somewhere else, we're kind of like, maybe not, So I just think right now the program is in the best shape it's been to start, and I think that fans can maybe, I don't know if you agree with this, maybe they can start to change what A&M is going to look like during the 2025 season.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that if you gauge the average fan's interest right now after what happened in the NCAA tournament with A&M, I think when you get the bad taste out of your mouth that was Buzz Williams leaving for the job at Maryland, whatever you want to say about it, I think when you get a coach like McMillan and what it means for the program moving forward, going into this so-called new age of NIL and revenue sharing, which is going to be coming up this spring and summer, I think you're going to find that A&M is going to have a more underrated recruiting ground and potential when it comes to college basketball, especially in the SEC right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that people, if they're ever going to judge McMillan, I just think it's so premature right now. And the biggest thing is, after these last moves, your excitement can go through the roof right now, because you are getting, and like I've said, you are getting immediate contributors. These guys are going to come in, play a lot of minutes, and give you plus minutes, which is the biggest thing. Because I do believe, I started covering the program professionally after I think it was before the 22 season. And this was when Buzz Williams was really kind of building the program. I think that it was right before they were snubbed from the NCAA tournament. Obviously, that great season by Quentin Jackson, the finish, getting to the NIT championship, losing to Xavier, and then you went into that next season thinking, okay, they're losing Jackson, but we know what they have in Wade Taylor. We know what they have in Henry Coleman, Anderson Garcia. They're getting all these guys in the portal, and it was good. It had its moments, right? And you got used to buzzball, right? You got used to the defense. And for A&M, defense has been king in football, and especially in the 90s when you go back to R.C. Slocum and everything like that. So that identity isn't different for A&M fans. But it got very, mentally draining after a while. And all you wanted Buzz to do was just get some shooters, get some guys that would pair with the Wade Taylors of the world and pair with their great defense and their rebounding. And outside of getting C.J. Wilcher last year, which – look, Wilcher had his moments. He wasn't used correctly. That was the biggest thing that a lot of people just like me just could not get over, is that, why don't you learn how to use a shooter like that in your system so that when you get to the NCAA tournament, and granted, he did have some big shots against Michigan in the second round, but it wasn't enough, and it never was enough. And you think of guys like Jace Carter, who, came in as a shooter and ended up being one of the worst shooters on the team. That was very confusing. So that model, I guess, of how Buzz Williams was getting players, it's hard to overly criticize it, because you did get guys like Anderson Garcia and Henry Coleman who leave the program as beloved people and athletes and guys who really made an impact. But at the same time, when I'm really doing the comparison, I've seen a lot of fans, very smart fans who follow the program very closely, kind of thinking the same thing, that this just feels different with McMillan. It feels like he really knows how to play this transfer portal game. He knows that if I get some really good players on campus next season and we kind of surprise some people, we beat the Alabamas, we beat Texas, we beat these teams, maybe we sneak into the NCAA tournament with a team that nobody really believes in because they just don't have a lot of depth. How far that will take this program is, I can't even talk about it, because I can't really give it just because we just don't know, but I can just tell that he is one of those type of personalities and future leaders in, some of the bigger conferences that's just going to utilize what you have to and do an extraordinary job. And this is just a really good start. And, I keep hearing, Federico's another name, right? And he's a guy that's kind of looking at it today, it wasn't a huge part of their team, but when you do look at what he did for them, both defensively, rebounding, very high percentage from the field, he was kind of a plug and play. Like, we need some good minutes for a big man. That's another guy that you add him to this team, it's just gonna take you over the top. And I just think that for fans maybe just excited about the football season next year and that start, I think basketball should be tied up there. I just think he's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, I think that from the public point of view, you see the coaches now buying into other programs as well. You saw from day one, literally 1 or 2 days after Bucky McMillan was hired, he's right at the baseball games, with Mike Elko also at the softball games. You're seeing these coaches now fully embrace A&M for their entire athletic program and showing that they want a togetherness that can be put onto a field, a court, a pitch, anything like that. They want these people who are going to be Texas A&M and not just themselves.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Man, you are hitting every point. It's the embrace of the university. It's the embrace of the values. I think I always see that with either Texas fans or hell, even Texas Tech fans now who want to become A&M's rival for some reason. I don't get that, but they criticize the culture. They criticize the embrace of the university's values and everything that makes you an Aggie deep down. And it was kind of funny. I think the stat was when Bucky McMillan had started attending games after he was hired, baseball was undefeated. Everybody was winning. Softball was undefeated. Then they did sustain a couple losses, but it's at the same time, it's like, well, is this really a surprise? Because I don't know, maybe it just brings something out of these guys that they see that every core program is not lacking in embrace. It's not lacking in excitement now. And, for all the people who, and we'll get to this by the end of the show, the Jim Schlossnagle exit, which every A&M person, now national media person who started paying attention to college baseball, as I remember kind of laughing about last summer and covering that whole debacle. We're going to hear more of it this week of people now caring about college baseball because, this drama between the return of the A&M to face Jim Schlossnagle after he left in the way he did. They started to think. I remember people started to kind of weaponize that against A&M and say, well, he doesn't want to be there anymore. Well, no, that's not the case. It had a lot to do with joining Chris Del Conte at Texas, who he had close relationship back at TCU. And that's the only thing I can think of where people wanted to outside critics wanted to openly criticize A&M for the, coaches didn't want to stay. But I don't think that's the case because, look, Buzz Williams was here for 6 seasons.
Yeah.
His biggest thing, and I had some discussions with people in the media circles of, does he want to deal with another rebuild? You looked at his history, and he tried to avoid those after one time. He already had to do that at A&M. We get that he had a connection to A&M, but when he had the opportunity to go and have another challenge in his career, I can understand that. Look, I can get that from a outside point of view of, look, Maryland is a basketball program that has won a national championship in the early aughts that is very relevant, and he just wants another challenge, and he doesn't want to do it here. But to be honest, that's A&M's win right now. That's Bucky McMillan has already proven that he was the right hire so far. And you're 100% right. His embrace of Aggie athletics has been great to see because he's taking on this job like he's supposed to be. That is the biggest job he's ever had, and he's going to do everything in his power to make A&M a winner in the very near future. And I mean, we'll talk about this season and we'll see what happens there. But this future is extremely bright for a guy who I have been personally watching during his time at Samford. I'm a basketball junkie deep down, so I like to watch the smaller schools. And I'll never forget that game that he played against Kansas. And I remember watching that and thinking, this guy's going to get an offer somewhere big, right? I mean, it can't be too long. And I can say I'm very happy to be covering him for the near future. Yeah,
as am I. Let's be honest. We see a lot of March Madness riser. We see the riser that is Bucky McMillan, especially when he went toe-to-toe with that Kansas team that was widely considered to be a deep run into the NCAA tournament. I just want to give a quick shout out to the way he has hired his assistants right now. I know that people who remember Mitch Cole from years ago under the Kennedy era, but the way that they have gone out and attacked the portal has been very meticulous up until this point. I think that when the portal closes tonight at 11:59, you're going to see a lot more drawn out approach. You're going to see maybe we do take it a little bit slower to try and find exactly who we need for this system year one. Kind of getting to pick and choose, because after tonight, that's it. We're not going to see any grad transfers enter. We're not going to see more of these people who are waiting on their eligibility waivers to enter, which is a whole different story by itself. But I think when you're Bucky McMillan taking this new job, especially as late as it was, trying to backfill 14 entire spots on the roster, it's going to be a process that A&M fans are going to have to live with. And I think what made it easier is that buy-in that you saw from McMillan. The 100% grateful type of attitude that he was, especially at that introductory press conference. He was fully ready to embrace the Aggie culture.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. I was actually going to get to that point, but thanks for kind of saving me there. His coaching staff right now, and I really don't have to name every person because that would take probably a long time to kind of go through their backgrounds, but these are two of them. Obviously, you mentioned Mitch Cole, both coached at A&M. I'm kind of blanking. It was Cole and
Kyle Keller.
Kyle Keller. Thank you very much. Both those guys obviously coached during the Billy Kennedy era, bringing, a very, very talented recruiting background. I mean, this is the thing about A&M that I think a lot of people maybe remember clearly is that Billy Kennedy, one of his best seasons, I think it was during the 2016 run, that included guys like Tyler Davis, DJ Hogue,
Tony Morelos.
Yes, Antoine. Man, there's a lot.
I think you're forgetting someone that's in the NBA right now.
Oh, Robert Williams.
There's a lot, yeah. Action for you.
Yeah, and you want. I mean, people understand that obviously basketball is now transfer portal recruiting everything. That's how you're going to win. You have to get the best players you can. And McMillan knew that he needed A&M ties to get off to a good start. He's already done that, and he started to add kind of outside guys too that bring equally strong recruiting backgrounds. So that's only going to help them immediately this offseason. And you're right. I think the last kind of splash guy, Boogie Fland, I think from Arkansas, I think he entered right when in the final deadline, which is that's going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, you're right. They've done the work so far. They've really done as much as we could ask, I think, of what you need to get done in this period. They could have landed maybe one more guy before, but this is where the real work starts, right? They know that. They understand that getting Duke Miles right now was you had to do that this week. You had to avoid getting him to visit anywhere else. And so I think the trend, and we're going to start watching that. Obviously, you're going to do a great job keeping track of that for all of us. I think that right now it's just wait and see. We can't really judge him at all because I think he deserves that grace period of you've done a lot so far, and we're going to see what else you're going to do going into the summer. And then going to the 25 season, we'll have obviously a better view of what the roster looks like and what they can do to potentially contend for NCAA tournament bid in his first season. So we're going to switch now. It was a great conversation, Cannon. Appreciate it, man. To the spring football game that was on last Saturday. Obviously, I had somebody in the chat that asked when it was. It was last Saturday afternoon. It was an early start. I remember I got the media email about it, basically saying like, okay, we're 12:30 now. I was like, okay, I guess that's okay. But early start, I'll have to say it was an interesting game overall. I'd like to preface that spring games I've been covering for a long time don't really tell you much outside of a couple position groups. And I think in this one, two position groups stood out. Number one was the defensive line that me and everybody's been writing about for the last, 3 months of they need defensive tackle depth. He needs to go out and get another defensive tackle because DJ Hicks, Albert Regis, and their transfer portal addition, Tyler Oniendum, I always screw his name up, fantastic, versatile athlete, but you just don't know how he's going to fit, right? You didn't know how Mike Elko was going to use him and Jay Bateman are going to use him. Well, it's safe to say that he is going to end up being probably one of the most impactful offseason additions we've seen. He was in the backfield almost every play. Granted, the interior offensive line was pretty young. Trey Zune, Armaj Reed Adams did not play in the game, so both kind of their best tackles were not there. And so they had a lot of young guys, a lot of freshmen playing, but it didn't really matter because he was getting pressure almost every play. And the biggest star of the game, obviously, is freshman edge Marco Jones, who I believe he had 5 sacks and 6 tackles for loss in the game, which I knew this kid was very talented coming in. I remember covering him in high school. Incredible athlete, one of those pass rushers that you just kind of see on the field. It's just easy for him, right? Because of his length and his strength and his speed. He's a fantastic athlete, very versatile, and just very fluid, right? Very fluid mover when he gets his first step, and he was really beating every tackle he had. And another guy I want to give credit to is TJ Searcy, the transfer from Florida, who more of a run defender, but he was also getting pressure all day, and he had some good pass rush moves, and looks like somebody that is going to make more of an impact that even I thought he would make.
Yeah, I really want to highlight the defensive line during that game. I know fans will probably say or try and blame it on the offensive line for letting them get past, but from what I saw, I was right up close and center on that 50-yard line. And let me tell you, the offensive line did as much as they could. Marco Jones, just getting up close to see how these 18, 19-year-old freshmen are on the field, it is you don't realize until you're up close next to them that they are just absolute athletes already, which says a lot, to be honest. You see A&M go out into the state of California and pluck him out right from the heart of like teams that were going after him. He was a highly touted guy, but A&M, and I know this may come as a surprise, but Marco Jones was their number one edge defender on their board. And Elko himself has said that getting Marco Jones down to College Station, even already for this spring, is going to do wonders for this defense, especially in the depth conversations that people are going to have saying, hey, you're losing Nick Skirton. You're losing Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. How are you going to backfill at this defensive line? I think we really, really did see that during the spring game. And I don't want to overreact to it, but the defensive line transfers that they got, whether it was a TJ Searcy, whether it was a Deion Hayes, whether it was Tyler Onyedim, I think you saw the potential that could be there come fall. So I'm really, really looking forward to how their end of spring and then going into the summer conditioning is, and then that first game against UTSA.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing. I think having, and I agree with you that it's always the case. So offensive line is always called out. Like, trust me, I know that very well. Is that every time guys get pass blockers, it's just, oh my God, we have O-line problems. They don't. Trust me. They really don't. I don't have to recount that Chase Pasantis, and the only competition they have right now is at center, and that's really only because Mark Naboo is coming back from injury. So I'm just going to tell you, O-line is not an issue. And they've got 6 freshmen who are going to rotate in sometimes, especially early in the season. They are fine. I will say that's the thing. I do remember that Marco Jones was their number one guy, and I think he showed you why. Two other their California guys they pretty much stole from the likes of USC and Oregon, who's obviously big in recruiting the California area, was Noah McHale. I think it's McHale, who had a very good game, really showed off his kind of sideline to sideline athleticism, very, very instinctual tackler, and Adonis Curry, who did fall down a little bit in the recruiting rankings. I do remember that. Obviously, some of that had to do with most of that has to do with injury or guys just not playing at the same level they did their junior season, which is some of it's politics. I'm going to be honest. But he had a good game. He played very well too. I do believe that Marco Jones is obviously going to be the guy from that California-based recruiting class that's going to make the biggest impact next season. We'll see McHale as one of those kind of Torian York type guys who ends up making a splash in fall camp and surprises everybody and ends up as a rotational guy. But I'm going to be honest, they hosted a Missouri State linebacker today for that reason, because they do think that they maybe need a little more depth at that position, even though, those of us who have been, kind of covering the depth chart since the end of the season, that's kind of down the list. But you do think with injuries and attrition and the fact that York and Scooby Williams right now, outside of Damian Samford is another guy that I think will make a jump as a rotational guy. But outside of that, it's kind of wishy-washy. So you do think that maybe a McHale and obviously maybe an addition to the transfer portal could end up being the case down the stretch and making an impact. But really outside of that, I think the safety group, sticking with the defense, safeties did okay. Me and Carter Carroll's obviously from 24/7 Sports was on our show last week. We did talk about that. The safety rotation is talented, but it is one of those positions where AJ Halsey, I believe is his name, from Houston, the safety that just entered the transfer portal, probably the best safety in college football right now, would be the type of player that A&M would probably put feelers out to. And the reason why is because they don't completely trust what they have right now. And that just has to do with Bryce Anderson, who's coming off of a very poor season. I think that people need to realize that he played quarterback his entire high school career. He came into the program as a safety. He had a good season. I think it was the 23 season, but ever since he's kind of been learning the position. And outside of that, you got you've got guys that I'm sorry, man, just one.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell you what, I really did like what I saw from Dalton Brooks out there. I will say,
That's what I was going to do too. Finish your point, man. Yep.
yeah. So Dalton Brooks actually really liked the rangy coverage that he was able to have, whether it was a two-man deep safety look for him, and let Bryce roam. You got to see him drop back, really kind of take what the offense gave him, and I did see a couple of snaps where he was actually covering the tight end in a man-to-man coverage, which was really, really cool to see. I think they're trying some things out with that safety and DB group. It'll be interesting to see who gets that full-time nickel spot, though. That's the one I'm eyeing over this spring and summer, is who gets that start week 1. And whether it's a Jordan Shaw, who I've heard has been exceptional during spring camp so far, whether it's going to be Tyreek Chappelle when he comes back fully. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a good story for Aggies to follow for the next couple of months.
Yeah, no, you're right on point. I was going to say Dalton Brooks is the guy, made a lot of boneheaded decisions last season. And that was the thing. If he cleaned that up and just played smarter football, very important player, very impactful guy, extremely athletic. Obviously, he came into the program as one of the more versatile athletes they had recruited. Obviously, played running back in high school as well. Very fast, very hard hitter. Plays that safety position to a T, like the way that you want to see in the SEC. But the fact is that Lyle Humphil, who's come in, one of the best hires I think A&M has made in a couple of years, because he's the technician guy. He's going to fix those small things. And that really goes to the entire secondary, especially with Brooks. And that's going to help Bryce Anderson, I think, more than anybody, because I think that was his biggest problem last season, was just technical problems, just where his eyes are, and his positioning. And he can make plays when he's on his game. It's just, and that's the thing. It's not a lack of talent. And another name I did here, because I do want to get to the cornerbacks, was Miles Davis, their freshman safety, who Mike Elko praised as one of the guys who's really improved this spring. That is another very talented guy who I think is going to be in this rotation. I think they're going to kind of find out what they have, how much these guys have learned against UTSA and kind of beginning of the season. And I can see them really going through that rotation and thinking, okay, who's our core group of safeties we're going to put out there when conference play starts. But they have a lot of options. That's the thing. They have a ton of options to go with. And I think Humphil is going to help a lot in that aspect. You're 100% right. The nickel position obviously is one to watch. Tyreek looks healthy. Credit to Tony Catalina for posting a video at one of their last practice of the spring, where in drills and back pedals, he looked very good. He looked like a healthy guy. I can tell you, someone who lifts weights a lot, I see guys who have had injuries and stuff, and they try to get back to running, and you can kind of see just a limp there. It's like they're not fully healthy. And so you can kind of tell when a guy is, at least 95% to being ready to play football again. And he looked that way. And I credit to Elko for keeping him out of the game. I don't think he needs to play. I think that guys like that, they played a lot of football. And I get people think, well, because he didn't play a lot last season, maybe he needs those snaps. I don't think that's the case. He's one of your most important defenders. But Jordan Shaw is a guy that Texas A&M star cornerback, who we have no qualms about. Will Lee spoke, praising Julian Humphrey, another addition, who I didn't even mention him because he had a very good game. I think he looked fantastic in coverage. So I don't really have a lot of qualms with him. I think a lot of people, and Carter actually mentioned this last week, which is kind of funny, is that a lot of A&M fans didn't really know who Humphrey was, and they found out that he was the corner covering Ryan Williams on his crazy touchdown. I'm like, okay, that's not fair. Like he's a good cornerback, and if Will Lee is praising him, he's not lying to you. He's done very well, and that's all I've heard is good things this spring. And Jordan Shaw is a guy that he said he's a dog, man. He's a tough guy. He's played very well. He's very sticky in coverage. And that's the thing. They have options at one of the most important positions. That's the biggest thing that I think fans need to know, is that going into the fall, they're not going to be, part of my phrasing, hamstrung with just one guy, right? they're gonna be able to look at that and go, okay, do we use Tyreek in this situation and put Shaw in this situation? Do we just keep him outside or we move him inside? It's just that's the great thing about having depth at these type of positions, is that you can make the best decision just weeks before the season starts. Going to the offense, which
let me guess.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me guess your other positional thing you want to talk about. Wide receivers.
Yes. I mean, it was going to be that. I'll give a little love to tight end first. I think that Amari Niblack and Bodenshire, Nate Borcher. Yeah. Borcher. Yeah. I have a confusing last name that people can't pronounce, and I can't pronounce anybody else's last name, which is kind of
funny. Don't worry. Pronunciation will probably get better by the time fall comes around.
Yes. Oh no, it will. Trust me, I'll be able to pronounce every last name on that roster. But he had a fantastic game, and this was a guy who was brought in from Nebraska as just an inline blocker, barely had any receptions to his name. He had a rack, like he was doing. I mean, he was making plays. I'm kind of looking down at the roster. I'm like, that guy, really? I mean, that's awesome. That's fantastic. If they're going to have another weapon like that, because we know what Amari Niblack's going to do. We know what Theo Melstrom's going to do. We know what those guys' skill sets are. But really, I've talked about this for the last couple of months, that I think Amari Niblack is going to be one of those X factors that a lot of people aren't talking about, because he had that kind of layoff when he went to Texas, because I think Steve Sarkisian wanted him to be a blocker. That's not his game. He's going to have to block a little bit with this scheme, but I think they're really going to put him out wide and really be a hybrid type of wide receiver. But that's just another big target for Marcel Reed, right? And, we'll get to Marcel Reed at the end, but making Marcel Reed's job easier is the biggest thing, right? Giving him a run game, giving him blocking up front, and getting him more targets. It's going to lead us to the wide receiver group, new wide receiver group that, I know we can talk about Casey Concepcion all day. He looked fantastic. And that's the biggest thing I think all of us were saying, is that he looks like the number one wide receiver, right? That's what we wanted. We wanted him to come in, look like that guy who's going to lead them in multiple categories. But what about everybody else? What about Mario Craver from Mississippi State? And then what about Terry Bussey? Terry Bussey did not play in this game, so we don't have to discuss that. But we know what Terry Bussey brings. It was a little sad because I did want to see maybe improvements, but he is dealing with some injury issues. And then Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman, who me and one of my writers at Aggies Wire were so high on these two guys. I can't tell you how many articles I've written about guys to watch, and I just include them in every single one. And I felt very good that both of them put on a show, and especially Isaiah Williams, who, I love that this kid is finally getting the praise he deserves, because he came in as a very underrated flip from Florida. I think he would have been a star with Florida even quicker because of their wide receiver issues. Obviously, A&M had some guys in front of him last season. This is his time to shine, man. This is his time to – and he already has kind of shown he is a playmaker. This is not just some guy who's going to run some good routes and catch a couple balls over the middle and maybe give you some deep game. This is a dude who's going to do everything in his power to make the contested catch. He made an incredible grab and showed off some real energy and toughness. And I think he won over the remaining fan base that really didn't know who he or Ashton Bethel-Roman really were, because I think they appeared maybe in one game. I think it was against New Mexico State at the end of the season.
I think a couple of games, whether it was McNeese or New Mexico State or any of those teams.
Yeah, I think it was that was pretty much the only appearance. I think that was the same with Miles O'Neill, who we'll get to in a little bit. But your thoughts? I mean, I personally think that, outside of maybe needing more size to replace Noah Thomas, I mean, that's the biggest thing, giving Reed a red zone target. This is a improved wide receiver unit. This is a unit that's really going to help Marcel Reed. It's going to make him more confident. I mean, speed, versatility. The only issue is really just size, which we weren't forgetting about Jerome Miles, who is their 5-star 2025 signee, who is recovering from an injury, who was at the game taking pictures with Mike Evans, which is pretty cool. But that's another guy that maybe could give you some size on the outside. So maybe they don't need to get a guy, but it just depends on how fast he's going to get assimilated to the team in the playbook.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. Obviously, we do want to see wide receiver 1, Casey Concepcion. He looked the part. And I think overall that was what A&M, their staff, wanted to see. I mean, I think in the first half, he had just 7 targets alone, just in that first half. We didn't really get to see a lot of Mario Craver, which, from what I've heard, can just take the top off of defenses. We didn't get to see a lot of him until that second half, where he caught a couple balls over the middle, got to have a little run after the catch. We saw a great catch over 2 defenders on that right sideline in that second half. But I really want to go back to your point of now A&M's fans are seeing who they picked up this past year in Ashton Bethel-Roman and Isaiah Williams. And you kind of covered Isaiah Williams a little bit before. I think that Ashton Bethel-Roman does have a chance to kind of come in with Terry Bussey being a little hurt right now, nursing an injury, and Jerome Miles not being on campus yet, finally starting to be able to prove exactly why they were recruited here in the first place and why the staff took a chance on them immediately after a month and a half on the job. They recruited them. They evaluated them really, really fast for the staff coming in. And it's kind of showing you a little bit in that spring game where Ashton Bethel-Roman has a lot of untapped speed. But really, how are they going to factor into this offense for the foreseeable future? And like you said, Terry Bussey is still nursing an injury, but I don't think that A&M fans have realized that this is actually his first off season with the program, where he did not get the spring practice that a lot of these all of these signees but one this past year are getting this year. So going through those conditioning, even while an injury is happening, is going to be monumental coming up this fall.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And we saw, mentioning obviously Mario Craver, he was a 17-yard and 29-yard reception, just great throws, and just the concentration and the speed and just the downfield acceleration. It's like that's the thing, and that's why Mike Elko had said before the season, this guy killed us, right? We wanted him on our team because when we played Mississippi State, he was one of the hardest covers we had against our best corners going against him. So you have the skill guys you need, and you kind of know, and that's the importance, I think, and like you just said, of Bethel-Roman and Isaiah Williams playing that well, because they're likely going to need both of them to step up at the beginning of the season and really fill out this wide receiver room. Because, Terry Bussey, this is the first offseason where he's been named a full-time wide receiver. They're going with that. That's who he is for this program. There was always that discussions of maybe playing cornerback or something like that, because they just don't want to. When you get an elite athlete like that, you think of Travis Hunter, right? Every time you get an elite guy, you think Travis Hunter, what position can he do? Travis Hunter wants to play both positions in the NFL. I doubt that's going to be the case. I doubt that a franchise would let him do that. But at the same time, you just don't want to screw up this type of guy to put him in the wrong position and not have the success. But it's just going to come down to the positive takeaways from this was Marcel Reed, and we'll get to the quarterbacks right now, is that he looked better. He looked like he had made those improvements that we all asked for: footwork, timing, accuracy. Obviously, he throws a great ball. That's the thing. When you see guys throw a football, you look at velocity, you look at accuracy. A lot of it's velocity. It's how fast you can get that thing there. Just get it out quickly, make your decisions, and it's getting better, right? It's hard to really say if he's made substantial progress, but like we've said, the biggest criticism that he's gotten was the Texas game. It was the Texas loss last year, where he was not finding guys and he wasn't making his reads, and he just looked out of sorts. But I'm going to be honest, it's very, very inappropriate, I think, to judge him based on that game. He's playing against guys like Jahdae Barron, who's going to be a first-round pick most likely, a very elite secondary with the Longhorns last year. This was a guy who really got thrown in to the starting lineup, and Connor Wegman got hurt on the road against Florida in one of the hardest places to play. Ended up leading A&M to that win. The guy, he's got the confidence to do this job. It's just he's done what we all expected this spring, which was make small improvements. there's going to be a discussion now with Miles O'Neill, who played substantial snaps in the spring game. Obviously, it's between him and Jacob Zeno, who's a transfer from UAB, as the primary backup. Mike Elko, after the game, basically kept it very brief. He said, look, I have not made my decision yet on who's going to back up Marcel Reed. I personally think that, Miles O'Neill has already taken a jump. He had a very complete game, looked very solid. Obviously, all that height and size and arm strength was shown. He showed that off all day. Obviously, it's one of those decisions where I don't think it's that big in terms of you have your security guy, right? Either him or Zeno are going to provide security if injuries happen. So I don't think it's that big of a deal overall to choose who's going to be his backup right now. But at the same time, Miles has become a kind of folk hero with some of the fan base. They think he's maybe better than Marcel. Look, this happens every offseason. I'm going to be honest. The kid is a future starter, in my opinion. He's somebody who I think it needs another year to sit and learn under this coaching staff. But again, he is a guy to keep an eye on, right? He's a guy that if Marcel Reed, knock on wood, were to go down next season, do you want to go with the veteran who threw for 3,000 plus yards a couple seasons ago, or kind of the untapped potential guy who – is 6'5" and has a big arm and is very confident? I mean, it's going to be one of those decisions that I think Elko is going to be very, I don't know. He's just not going to be, it's not going to be one of those decisions that comes very quickly. I think we'll probably hear something by a couple weeks before the season starts.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And I don't think A&M fans need to be worried about who is QB2 behind Marcel Reed as of right now. Now, when it comes before the season, if we see that O'Neill is the QB2 behind Marcel Reed, I think fans can know, okay, we are in really good hands if something drastic were to happen. Because that means that O'Neill has taken the steps necessary in just over a year now in the program that the coaching staff feels like they can trust him should something happen. Now, does that mean that Jacob Zeno isn't as talented? No, of course not. He has so much experience playing under multiple head coaches and time now. And I know he's a San Antonio native, but his time at Baylor, I think if fans were to go back and watch, he's still kind of that same QB in terms of decision making and being able to make the correct read, whether that's a check down throw or just a little dump pass over to the running back out of the flats. I think that A&M fans can trust who they have back there no matter what. Now, a point I do want to make is that if and when Marcel Reed takes the first snap against UTSA, and we see that this offense is tailor-made for him, I think that if he were to go down, you're going to see these backup QBs struggle because of how much that offense was tailor-made for Marcel Reed and his ability to take off. And you want to enable that. But the whole focus going into this offseason is how can we make Marcel Reed better? How can we give him those little baby steps to progress as a passer, to progress in making these smart reads down the field where it can really open up the run game that A&M leaned on for almost 60% of their plays this past season. Now, I will say it will be nice to potentially have more than a 650-yard receiver this next season. Could we go back to A&M having those 4-digit wide receivers? I think our previous one dates back all the way to, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's either Christian Kirk or Josh Reynolds. Was our last 1,000-yard receiver.
I believe it's Christian. I believe it's Kirk. Yeah. I'm trying to think back in the 2016. I believe it's Christian Kirk, yeah.
Yeah, so going back to Christian Kirk was either back in 2016 and 2017, which is frankly too long of a time to have a program without a 1,000-yard wide receiver. And I think you saw over the past couple of years, A&M did lean on that run game a lot. How can they now change to where they have a more balanced offense to where they can have these 1,000-yard wide receivers and show that, hey, Holman Wiggins is here. He can get you to the league. Now the wide receivers have to put that talent onto the field. But it's all in part by Marcel Reed. How is he able to get his wide receivers involved?
Yeah, that's really it. This team is, I mean, I really couldn't have said any better. I think that really kind of sums up the QB2 issue right now, is that if Marcel, because of his skill set, we did see in the spring game, obviously everybody knows what he can do with his legs. We saw a couple plays that he would have gotten some big yardage if it wasn't the spring game, where if you touch a guy, it's just a whistle. And he did look bigger. He did look a little quicker. I mean, I'm going to be honest, but it's one of those things where if you do tailor make on offense to his skill set, it is damaging to the rest of the offense in terms of if things happen. So you do need to, that is the thing, is that if he has made those improvements as a passer, which again, in terms of, like you said, kind of those quick dump off passes that, really just kind of quick offense, the type of offense that Colin Klein wants to run, which is a lot of play action, which is get the run game going and get him easy looks to get the ball just kind of trickle down the field and really kind of Jimbo Fisher-esque of, kill a lot of time, possession football. Look, if he can do that, this team is going to be very good next season. If he can't, and it's the kind of the same we saw last year, where, they get behind the sticks and then he just couldn't pass his way out of it, outside of, I guess, the Auburn game where they lost, and that was probably his best game from the pocket, then we're going to be talking about A&M's issues once again. So you got to get the wide receivers involved. You got to spread this offense out. You're going to have a run game. Look, mainly you're going to have a run game because you just have more running backs, right? You don't have just Le'Veon Moss and then you're screwed. But they have too much talent here now, and the biggest issue, right, was separation last season, right? Guys couldn't get open. I remember talking about that for 3 consecutive weeks of what guy can separate the most. Well, there's a Terry Bussey, and then who else? Like, you got separators now. You got guys who are athletic enough and quick enough to get out of the to get to their spots and give Reed a opportunity to hit him right there, hit him square in the chest. And it's just not that hard to really look at this roster and say that they're not going to take a step up compared to last season if Reed improves. If he improves, we're talking about a potential playoff team. If he doesn't, I'm not going to say really, if we're just at the mean, then we could be talking about another 8-win season and disappointment. So we're going to actually talk about the upcoming NFL draft, which is starting on Thursday. I can't believe it's here already. It really just can't. Can't believe it's the end of April already. But A&M is going to have 3 players selected starting on Thursday, most likely. Obviously, 3 defensive linemen, starting with Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton, and Shamar Turner. In Jordan Reed of ESPN's, his last mock draft, which is very interesting, Reed. He had Shamar Stewart going to Green Bay in the first round, which I thought was kind of hilarious given the fact that they selected Edgerton Cooper last draft in the second round, who's ended up becoming a star for them. They love those kind of Shamar Stewart's kind of looked at it as like a project in terms of as a pure edge, because they feel like the coaching staff didn't use him correctly. He wasn't coming off the edge enough. He pursued too hard. He didn't make enough the tackles necessary, but because his traits are so elite and he had such a great showing at the NFL Combine, this is a guy who you can take a shot with and could end up being that future Hall of Fame guy if he's under a good coaching staff. Nick Scorton, obviously he was mocked to, I think, second round to Baltimore, which I thought was, that made a lot of sense. Another guy, obviously he would join former Texas A&M great defensive tackle Justin Madubuike, who just signed a big contract. And he fits their scheme. He's a strong side defensive end. He's a great run stopper, one of the naturally gifted guys, just not as naturally gifted as Shamar Stewart is from a trait perspective. And then Shamar Turner, who we all remember as being one of the more consistent defensive linemen for A&M over the years. But last season, he had a lot of penalty issues. And sadly, his great playing through injury, exhibiting that toughness that every A&M fan wants to see. The penalty issues really rang up, and he kind of got that moniker, which look, I'm glad he's in the draft and he can focus on his professional career now. We don't talk about Shamar Turner committing penalties anymore, but he was mocked to the Dallas Cowboys, which I thought was very, very smart. And I think the Cowboys got someone like that in the third round. That's going to shore up a lot of issues. I am a Dallas Cowboys fan, obviously, but some issues in their defensive line, especially in their interior right now, they couldn't stop the run or really rush the passer inside. But your thoughts? I think those are actually out of the mocks I've seen. I think those are the most accurate for all three, and I think that's probably the best landing spots, especially for someone like Stewart, who I'm forgetting the name. It was an Iowa defensive end they drafted a couple of years ago, who was in a similar trait situation. Not think of the name right now.
Yeah, so I saw that mock draft earlier today as well. I do think it is kind of crazy now that talking 3 months after the season is over that Shamar Stewart just shot up these draft boards. I don't think that any NFL team now is going to not have him on their draft boards. Now, we saw at the start of the college football season back in September, early or late August, that Nick Skirton was already a projected first-round pick. And then kind of as that season trailed on, we saw in the kind of last 4 games, the run stopping was still really good, but he wasn't necessarily getting the sack traits that a lot of NFL teams are kind of looking for. But you kind of saw it with Skirton, Turner, and Stewart, is that sometimes the numbers aren't always everything. And the physicals that Stewart put up kind of widened the eye of all these NFL teams. And I think he's had visits with Pittsburgh, with Arizona, Dallas. My preferential landing spot for him would be in New Orleans, up early in the top 15. But I've seen him go as high as pick 7, and as late as pick 30.
Yeah, that's the thing. He is one of those guys, and it's kind of hard to write about him pre-draft right now because you want to, when you usually talk about these draft, I mean, how many mocks I've went through, but you kind of talk about as high to mid to low type of guy, but he really is everywhere, right? Because there is going to be a team potentially in the top 10 that just says, look, we need pass rush. We know our coaching staff. We trust them. We can get this guy in here and make him that 5-star number 1 defensive line prospect type of player, because we saw the tape and we can tweak those things, right? We can tweak those issues. I think a lot of them were watching the South Carolina game when you can just hear that pop, and it's just like, dear, this guy's violent, right? This is somebody that you can really work with, and that's the thing. Skirton was always interesting to me because, I agree with you. I remember his best game of the 24 season was against Arkansas, I would say.
Yes.
That sack fumble at the end that actually won the game. Was really beating his guys relentlessly off the edge, but he really wasn't overpowering guys, especially tackles, towards the end of the season. A lot of people were, he showed up a couple times where he really didn't have a statistic. Maybe he had 1 tackle or 1 pressure, and it was like, where is he? But here's the thing. I think a lot of it was weight issues. I personally think that. I think he was playing too heavy, and I think that he was kind of playing that tweener position, like that 4-eye type of size where you can sneak him inside, and they weren't doing that a lot with him. They were playing him off the edge, and when you're that heavy, unless you're in a 3-4 type defense where you have to be bigger because you're going against 2 guys usually, it's I just don't understand why they played him that way. I'm not a coach, but he dropped, I think, nearly 30 pounds at the combine. He looked faster. He looked more fluid. He looked better. He looked happier, to be honest with you, because I think he now knows, look, I could be a first-round pick. I'm probably not going to be, but I'm going to be very valuable in the 2nd or 3rd round, and a team is going to get a day 1 starter because I'm playing it the way they should be. I feel like I can fly off the edge now. I don't feel congested anymore. And I think he's going to be a very sneaky pick for somebody. And if Baltimore gets him, that's just rich get richer, to be honest with you. But and then lastly, Turner was interesting because he was injured, did not participate. I'm trying to think. I don't think he participated in drills during Texas A&M's combine either.
No, he didn't. I think that was already at the point where they had found out about the injury and were saying, "Hey, we'll be safe rather than sorry for your career."
Yeah, and look, that's pretty good news for him because sometimes that does drop guys down, right? Because they're just not participating and they feel like there's injury issues. We hear the kind of talk in season before the draft starts, which really ramped up the last 2 days, which is this prospect has this nagging injury that could be something you need to watch if you want to pick him with a premium selection. And I don't think that's a problem for him, though. I think it was a clean break, and it was something that can be fixed pretty easily for his position, right? Because he's not a wide receiver, he's not a cornerback. Because that's the biggest thing with cornerbacks. If there are leg issues or lower body issues, hip issues, that's a killer. That's a killer for your career. I can name like 10 guys who there could have been really good in the NFL, but because of injuries, it just never worked out. And so for him, that's good news. The fact that he's still projected as a 3rd-round pick, I mean, you can't have it any better for Shamar Turner. I'm going to be honest, because I could have seen him go in the later rounds even, and he'd just be a sneaky future starter for them. But he still has a lot of value for teams. Do you think Dallas is probably a really good landing spot for Shamar Turner?
I think in that 3rd round, we're kind of seeing a lot of teams in that back half of that 3rd and then that starting of the 4th. They're going to start targeting those. Hey, I want these traits on the offensive and defensive line, especially with teams like Dallas, with teams like Baltimore earlier. You're going to get these teams that are going, okay, instead of best player available, where am I able to get these value traits that we can work on to potentially see what you have? And because the NFL is really not about potential as much anymore. It's about working on the potential you have refined. That's why we selected you. Mm-hmm. And with Shamar Turner, you kind of see he's just a big body just waiting for these running backs, these quarterbacks to go up the middle. And to have a guy who can wreak havoc in the NFL, especially on these massive guards and centers, you want to take those chances. Now, Dallas getting him in the 3rd round, will I say it is a steal? I don't think it'll be a steal, or to be honest, I think that whoever you get at that 3rd round, if it does become Shamar Turner, then you're going to have a guy who is willing to come in whenever to stop those runs.
Yeah, this isn't a Dallas podcast, obviously, but I would say
as
a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would say please pick a wide receiver in 1st round, go get a running back, go get another O-lineman, and then go get a defensive tackle. And I think you're going to have a lot of options, and I think Shamar Turner kind of represents how valuable this class is and how much value you can get in the later 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. And if you have those picks, utilize them well because you can change your team on a dime. But it is pretty incredible, and it is very fun to think that even the way that A&M finished the season at 1-4, and really these guys were a little bit forgetful, right? Because it was really the focus on the secondary was bad and Marcel Reed, and you kind of forgot. And then all of a sudden, both Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton just shine during the combine, and Aggie fans and everybody else kind of realized, and these guys are good. They were on A&M last year. It's like, yeah, well, they had their moments, and they could end up being better pros, which we've seen with a lot of these players. I think Matt Abikier is one of those guys who was always good and just became better at the next level. And if we continue to see that trend with defensive linemen coming from A&M, for Mike Elko, that is a fantastic recruiting pitch. And B, that is just a great, Aggies in the NFL, we used to do an article every Sunday, and I don't know if we're going to do it again this year, but it got a little tiring. There are a lot of Aggies in the NFL, and they're still playing at a high level. And for all the flack that A&M gets for 8 wins and you're not consistent, it's like, well, look at the NFL. They're producing a lot of pros, a lot of starters. So it's going to be very fun to see where these guys land. I'm very excited to cover it. We have run out of time to talk about the baseball game. I think we can honestly say this is the biggest one of the year. We could have spent the entire show talking about Jim Schlossnagle and how Jace Levelette and Ryan Prager and Caden Sorrell and all these guys who played under Schlossnagle, recruited under him, how emotional this return to face their former coach is going to be, playing in Austin against the number 1 team, who, credit to Texas, they look like the best team in baseball right now. I'll give them that. But this is going to be I don't know. I saw the ticket price, that an article on it, and people were just kind of looking at me like, "That's real." I was like, "Well, yeah." I mean, we were talking like thousands of dollars for like, like some of the closest to the dugout seats, and
Oh
it's
my goodness.
it's going to be dramatic. It starts on Friday night, I believe at 7 p.m. It's going to be nationally televised, and it's probably going to be the most watched college baseball series of the season, I would think. But
Yeah. I think that Saturday game at 2:30, you're going to see, especially whoever wins game one.
yes,
That game two is going to be electric either way.
yes, that's the thing. I personally would love to see kind of A&M pull what they pulled against South Carolina and Arkansas recently. Get that game one, and I think they have a chance. You got Ryan Prager on the mound to start. Just give us a clean inning. I think that a lot of fans have had put their conspiracy theory hats on and been like, he's saving his best for now. I'm like, no, that's probably not why, but
it's probably not the case.
It could be one of those emotional situations where he's like looking at Schlossnagle and thinking, I'm just going to dominate right now. And guess who you have after him? You have Weston Moss, who's become my favorite player ever. Of just looking at, I mean, that guy's confidence makes you feel like a little kid playing baseball again. It's like you got your best chance of getting to this series off the right foot on Friday night, because I think Texas might be a little overhyped for this. That's just my thing. A&M won tonight. They beat Sam Houston, I believe 11-4.
Yeah, they run them.
Yeah, and just obliterated them. Blake Binderup, who another guy we could talk about relentlessly, has been excellent. If he's a guy who's going to keep playing like this, I think he had 2 home runs tonight. That's just going to help A&M even more. Caden Sorrell had a home run. Look, this team is very hot right now. I love that I'm allowed to say this, and I don't have fans commenting on my articles going, don't say that. They've only won. Well, no, it's true. They are hot, and I don't think they're scared of this team. I think that Texas is one of the best pitching staffs. I think they're second nationally in ERA. I think they have one of the, some of the better starting rotation. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair, but what we have to remember is that, and this is the biggest key, is that A&M's power at the plate has been phenomenal. I mean, let's see tonight. I think they're up to like 69 or 70 home runs now, which last time I checked, it was like 18th nationally. Like, they've been hitting the ball. And Texas, to their credit, they have like 370 plus hits this season. They've been pretty good. I'll give you some insider information, I guess. They beat down Auburn last weekend, and one of my buddies who covers Auburn professionally, I kind of asked him, I said, well, what happened? Like, I didn't have time to watch that game. And he said, look, Texas took advantage of the fact that we don't have a ton of great players outside of 2 guys, you know? And so being that A&M's play collectively well and everybody is showing out. It's not just Jace Levelette, who was named SEC Player of the Week. It's not Caden Sorrell is a huge part of their improvement. But when you have guys like Binderup and Wyatt Hensler get going, Caden Kent, who's been fantastic, both on offense and defense, you're playing like a team. And if the starting pitching does enough and the offense keeps producing, A&M has a great chance to win this series. Not outright. I do not expect a sweep at all. But you get out to a good start. If you steal a game one, anything could happen, and it's going to be very fun. I mean, I'm very excited for it. I'm very excited because I didn't know it was going to be worth anything 3 weeks ago. I think we all did when we saw A&M get shut out against Tennessee. And then I think what really changed the season was Terrence Keel making that catch, stealing a home run, and they won eight straight after that. I think the season is completely flipped. Shout out to Terrence Keel, who had his first home run tonight, which
what a great night. Past couple of weeks for Terrence Keel.
Oh, I know. I am so happy for that guy. I love that kid. I think we're talking about representatives of A&M. He's going to be a superstar for them for years to come. Obviously, his dad, Terrence Keel, rest in peace, who passed away years ago. He's carrying on that legacy. It's fantastic to see. So, yeah, that game is on Friday night, and I believe it's going to be on ESPN2. I'd have to.
It should be. It should be ESPN2. I think we may get a switch for Saturday.
Probably SEC Network or something, but it's going to be nationally televised. So for all the people who have issues with ESPN Plus and SEC Plus, which I've seen a lot of that, you won't have to worry about that.
No, you don't have to worry at all.
Anyways, man, it was great to have you on the show. We had an awesome conversation. I loved it. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, they can find me over on Twitter or X, as however you want to call it, at Torres Cannon, just my last name, first name flipped. And then a couple of last words we'll leave you with is this basketball transfer portal, man. You may see a couple more visits over this week that may come out of the blue. I've had people, and this is just a nugget just for this show, I've had a couple people tell me to look out for Florida transfer forward Samuel Alexis as a potential name.
Okay.
So just for this show, if people want to kind of tune in a little bit, I haven't got any confirmation on it. Just say, hey, maybe A&M fans will take a look at this guy.
And they should. And you've done a fantastic job. You're one of the best hires. I tried my best the other day. We're going to have you back on the show as much as possible, man. You were fantastic. Obviously, when this starts heating up with the portal additions and stuff like that, we'll have you back on. We have plenty to talk about over the next 3 or 4 months. We got a big football season in front of us, and we are in the midst of a baseball season, which is just surprising us every weekend. I'm going to be honest. I have not had more fun finally in my job for a while after that football season ended. But anyways, we are going to be back next Tuesday night with another show. This was the 4th show of Texas A&M Aggies Live. And you can follow me, obviously, at Cameron Honesty on X. And as you guys know, I'm the lead writer for Aggies Wire at USA Today. You can find me at aggieswire at usatoday.com. We do updates every single day on the hour. All right, guys, I'll see you next Tuesday.